Hi, it's Sunday morning, snowy in down here in Baltimore and up there in New York where you are, Alan, and
Oh, lots of snow, Andy.
lots of snow. And we're talking return to healing, and there's so many things we could talk about. And Alan and I talked about all these topics, but we wanted to talk a little about nutrition stuff, because it is the way it's portrayed by the medical establishment and the way it is actually exists are almost like two different universes. It's like a Star Trek alternative universe. So I went down to visit my mom this weekend. I just got back and I had an Uber drive from the airport to her house, and the guy was a talker, and he nicest guy from Spain, probably in his 70s. And he talked about health. He didn't know who I was. And he started talking about how in this country, we are relying on people who are basically tied to the drug companies, and they're basically salesmen for the drug company. I said, "Who do you mean by that?" He said, "Well, the doctors." And he said, "They don't know anything about nutrition." He said, "You ever hear about nutrition from a doctor?" He said, "They talk nonsense." He said, "In Europe," I said, because he's from Spain, I said, you guys live like 8 years longer on average than we do in Spain and Portugal and those places." He said, "Yeah, because we don't have to study nutrition. We know how to eat." He said, "We eat regular food. We don't have these fad diets." He said, so we were talking about fat. There are some studies, Alan, that just came out, and we put out a newsletter every 2 months in our practice. And I had lots of stuff on the fact that high fat diets, including animal fat, by the way, which is widely, the nutrition medical nutrition community hates all fats, but the nutrition community doesn't. But animal fats reduce the rate of dementia fairly significantly. I'm talking
Absolutely.
about eating the high fat versions of animal fats over time. We know that people on a low fat diet have more diabetes, they have more heart disease, because we know sugar is the culprit, right? And we also know that someone also complained that, Kennedy made a new nutrition triangle. It pretty
He
much
flipped it
says
upside down.
flipped it upside down. Says what we're saying now. You gotta eat more grains, fats, that nuts, oils, all that kind of stuff, less sugar. And it's funny that and this was in our book. The person who made the last nutrition triangle was paid by the sugar lobby. He was a Harvard professor. He wrote a bunch of articles that he basically made up, showing fats were bad. Sugar was not a culprit. And in his little nutrition triangle, which is the one that was just replaced, yeah, it was just fats were the evil entity, and it shouldn't be that way. And when this guy found out at the end of the ride, I said, "I'm a doctor." He stopped the car. He said, wait, doctors don't talk this way. Where'd you get any training in this? The doctors are just want to give you pills and give you diagnoses and tell you have this is wrong with you, that's wrong with you, this is wrong with you." So yeah, the idea that and by the way, my patients, I work in a very liberal community. The fact that Kennedy had anything to do with this nutrition triangle means it was wrong. It's just like
Absolutely.
this binary. Anything that the cardiologists say is right, anything Kennedy say has got to be wacko because he said Tylenol caused autism, and no one can get past some of the crazy things that guy said. But he knows about nutrition,
Yeah.
and he knows that that's the center.
Well, and
Yeah,
he also knows that, one of the biggest problems in this country is, ultra processed foods. Like
right.
it's so common sense, and the world doesn't eat the way we do. And again, it comes back to common sense, Andy. We need to look at the parts of the world that live the longest and watch what they eat. And it's variable in the different parts of the world. Some parts of the world drink a lot of wine and they live longer than us. Some parts are close to plant-based diets. But if you go back to the cavemen, they were hunters and gatherers. They ate meat. They cooked their meat and they ate what they found on the ground. Whatever they found, they ate and they got stronger and they didn't die from cancer back then. We created this with the stuff we put into people and the chemicals we put into our water and the process, all crap we have in food. So, there's clear evidence of certain things that are bad for you, and then there's some clear evidence of certain things that are good for you. I just read, coffee's been one of those things that's gone back and forth over the years.
It's true.
And just like aspirin, but there's a lot coming out on coffee now that, 2 cups of coffee, people have 2 cups a day, live longer. Now I've
Especially in the morning, especially I
it
say.
has to be in the morning.
Yes.
Two cups of coffee in the morning, and you will live longer.
Yes.
Now, I always say it's like, the Diet Coke thing. If you have Diet Coke, you're making yourself fat, therefore Diet Coke makes people fat. Well, how do you separate Diet Coke from everything else in a study? You can't. It's
It's a
impossible.
it's a
So what you
correlation. Yeah.
Right. It's a total correlation, So who the heck would want to drink Diet Coke if you weren't overweight? It's silly things and goes back to the common sense. So we know that, omega fatty acids in salmon are good for you. But if you eat, 5 doses of salmon or tuna, there's other things you got to
You
worry
got
about.
mercury. You got mercury. That's
Exactly.
the problem. Yeah.
We know too
Moderation is what you're preaching.
exactly too much of anything is
Right.
bad for you.
But people in this country like to go all out, right? If when the low fat craze came, everything, all fat got replaced, right? We were eating cookies that were no fat. And guess what? If there's no fat in the cookie, how do you make it taste good? It's all sugar. So it was like you're eating a pile of sugar. The whole low fat craze thing led to this swing toward more sugar and white flour. And then they invented a fake fat, margarine, which turned out to be far more toxic. Because again,
Yes.
it's ultra processed, right? Everything we're doing now is ultra processed. We are not eating whole foods. And you ask a doctor what that means, and 90% of the time they're gonna not even understand what you're talking about. They'll say, well, just stick to the low fat. That's what they say. Look, you mentioned all over the world they eat differently. There are places that do eat a decent amount of meat. Even in the blue zones, the Sardinians
Yes.
eat meat, and they look at the cows that are in Sardinia, and those cows, which graze up and down the mountains, are eating so much vegetation that when they study the meat, it's loaded with all these omega-3 fatty acids that feed the gut bacteria and actually it's almost like you're eating a pile of vegetables.
And there's no antibiotics in there.
And there's no
And
antibiotics,
there's
no
no
hormones,
hormones.
no hormones, and the cows walk. They're not in these stuck pens. And by the way, this is true of eggs, right? When I was part of so eggs, they're when the chickens can run around and eat organic grass, not like because a lot of the chickens are fed this
Mhm.
pesticide-laden corn and other processed corn and all, and so is the beef, by
Yeah.
the way. That's what you're eating. You're eating all the pesticides, all this ultra processed food, and the hormones and antibiotics that the cows have.
So
So I said, if you look back in time 100 years, I ask my patients sometimes. I said, how much did Benjamin Franklin eat pasture-raised eggs and organic vegetables and grass-fed beef? And my patients are like, I don't know. I don't think they had that back then. I'm like, that's all
exactly.
they had. That's all they had back then. There was not processed food back then. And people when they escaped childhood illnesses lived as longer or longer back then. And that's another thing people don't realize is that this longevity we have now is primarily from the fact that we could treat some infections and women don't die in childbirth and we know surgical anesthesia technique and we know you shouldn't drink water that someone
No,
just pooped in. That's all it
that's
is, right?
that's why people live longer.
But
Andy, so I
living
raised
shorter now. We're living shorter now because we're eating the cardiology diet, the cardiologist diet. So we're eating shorter, which, by the way, Alan, is very good for the cardiologist. The worse we
absolutely.
eat.
Absolutely. So I raised chickens, Andy. I don't know if we
Oh,
ever
I didn't
discussed
know
that.
that. I didn't know
So
that about you.
So, where I live, I can't exactly free range the chickens.
Right.
My neighbors would just not be happy. So,
No.
I give my chickens corn,
Yeah.
and again, I don't know what's in it. And to help them lay eggs, I use something called egg layer pellets. And if you read the ingredients in egg layer pellets to help chickens make raw eggs, you'd be like, holy crap, why I would not eat that chicken. It's like so, and that's in my backyard. So it's
Right.
look,
What are you going to do? Yeah. But
there's just so much lack of common sense. So, you know, in my residency program, you're right. There's very little attention to nutrition. So me and Andy have been trained in integrative medicine. Me and Andy have been trained in exercise. We've been trained in nutrition. We've read about it extensively. We talk about it extensively, but it comes down to common sense. Too much of anything is bad for you. Too much of good things is bad for you. So it's all about moderation. Simple things like do not eat ultra processed food. Do not eat
Right.
processed foods.
Right.
We know that like, the color of ham in a ham sandwich is not natural.
No.
Like how did it get that way? You ever see a ham, the pig skin looking like that? It's it's about common sense. Now, if you love ham and that's your favorite thing and you want a ham sandwich, have it once a month. It won't kill you. But if you have that stuff every day for lunch, it will kill you.
And that's the whole thing is, people can still have foods that are bad for them. I'm a sugar addict, but I keep it out of my house, as all addicts should do. That doesn't mean I am, I'm a Puritan about sugar. I'll still eat it sometimes, but I understand that what it's doing to me. It's clearly not good for me. And I think small quantities probably no big deal.
Yeah,
So I
I
don't have
agree.
a problem with that, but I do supplement it. People say, well, you're in a heart. I say, I'm on a high carb, high fat diet. They said, what does that mean? That's not what we're supposed to be on. I said, well, fiber's all carbs. I said, fruits and vegetables are all carbs. I said, nuts, oils, avocados are all fat. I said, I eat like these pasture-raised eggs. You see the yolk in a pasture-raised egg. It's dark, right? It's good
Yep.
for you. And it's actually, again, loaded with omega-3s, feeds the gut bacteria really healthy. And I have a half a cow sitting in my freezer that I got from a farm where they feed them, where they run around and they eat organic grass and they don't get any shots of anything. So that's what I'm eating, those kind of foods. And yeah, the little bit of sugar, who cares? But I got to tell you, when I eat that way, I feel better too. It's not
Yeah,
it's, it's not just a matter of healthy. It's a matter of how you feel, how you think, how sharp you are, all that stuff. And yeah, it's not just coffee, it's eating well. It's the whole package.
absolutely. Look, I've had some weight problems in my life. I work 16, 18-hour days and I got to grab things to eat when I can. And that's a huge downfall, and a bunch of years ago, I just decided I need to change the way I'm eating or I'm going to die young. And I didn't want to die young. I've worked too hard in my life. I want to
You
I
got
want
to
to
retire one
what
day.
want to enjoy it. Even if I don't retire, at least I want to get a little old.
Yeah.
And it's like, my lunches were, pizza, takeout Chinese, or the deli. Like that's what's there in an inner city where, I work and practice. Like, there's not health food stores to get
Right.
good to
Which is
get good
another
things.
problem too, by the way.
So I started, bringing my lunch to work. It was one quick change that, 15 pounds came off me in like a month just by bringing my lunch to work,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
And you with these GLP-1s out there, those are the shots that you don't have to eat well, right? You just get a shot. That's the ultimate medical approach to weight. We don't know what these are going to do long term or what they're even doing to you short term. But one thing they found, there was a recent study that showed that people who take these, a lot of them have become malnourished. And by malnourished, it means they're not getting the nutrients they need and their gut bacteria is dying. What happens when the gut bacteria dies? Diabetes, heart disease, cancer, infections, fatigue, diarrhea, all sorts of problems. Why? Because they're just cut out calories, but they're still eating junk.
yeah,
Uh,
we know the gut is the start of good health. It really is. And if you don't put good stuff into you, every system in your body gets messed up totally if you're doing that.
yeah,
It's clear. And again, it is not from one thing. Again, because if you have, a PBJ sandwich once in a while on white bread, which is, probably Wonder Bread. I'm sorry, we're going to get sued now.
Do they
You know,
still make Wonder Bread? I don't even know.
they do, and when you look at the ingredients, but when to me the only way I could eat a PBJ is on what white. bad bread, like it
Yeah.
just doesn't taste good on
Of
multi-grain,
course.
and it doesn't even taste good on like homemade bread. Like I've tried it. It's like not the same. It's got to be on that fresh Wonder Bread. All right, so if you have it once a month, it's not going to kill you. We need diversity in our foods. And Andy, you said it. It's about fruits and vegetables and meats and eggs and chicken and fish and from healthy sources and remove ultra processed foods, or really not just ultra, like any processed food is just really bad. We need to eat food that's whole foods.
And so some people have when I took this bogus program, which was lifestyle medicine. And I say bogus because they were really they felt like they were providing alternative medicine, but they were really just providing the same garbage that the whole
Mhm.
medical system does, and
Exactly.
all about pre-diabetes and lowering cholesterol and all the nonsense we know is doesn't exist. So when I took it, they basically said that anything you put in a blender is processed. So and they said dried fruits are processed. And I'm like, you got to make a line here because there's
Yes.
nothing wrong with dried fruits. You
Huh.
can make a smoothie with all sorts of good stuff in it, and it's great for you. And calling that processed then links it
That's
basically,
ridiculous.
yeah, they link it to the other stuff, which is ultra processed.
Well,
So
you could kind of say it because you're using a food processor,
yeah,
but
exactly. This is not, it's all like again, it it blasts common sense away, right? Because we know that's perfectly fine to do that.
yeah. So I actually went a different route in my training. So I trained through a fellowship at the University of Arizona Andrew Weil Center,
Oh yeah.
which is less, commercialized. There's some, they need their corporate sponsors as well, but it's much less. So when I started, people saying, well, you're an integrative doc. How are you not a member of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine? And there's a board exam you could take and all of that. And I'm like, why did I need a board exam for? I'm a board certified, double board certified in family medicine and hospice and palliative care. Like, do I need the credibility to be able to say eat healthy and exercise? And that's what it's about. And if you look at some of their corporate sponsors,
Oh,
okay,
it's terrible. Terrible.
it's, and many of them, even some of our own academies have corporate sponsors, not just the drug companies, but food companies,
Exactly.
a bunch of years ago, the American Academy of Family Physicians made this deal with Coca-Cola. Like everybody was like, oh my God, like it lasted 1 year because the membership went up in nuts. It went crazy. I go to a meeting that's sponsored by the American Dairy Society, and a bunch of people at the meeting were like, how dare you? Like, you can't say that. Milk is making people sick. And it's like,
And by the way, this was a big contention I had because I talked to the person in charge of the society because I would have failed the exam just by answering questions that I knew from nutrition. My nutrition training were right, and that they, in their dogmatic one right answer way of thinking about things, all eggs are bad, all meat's bad. So I said, how come you don't distinguish between pest? I said, not once in this 80-hour course did you mention the word organic. I said, you just put all things in the same category. You never mentioned pasture raised or grass fed or anything. I said, all meat's the same. I said, yeah, 90% of meat's terrible because it's highly processed. I said, in the Dairy Association, by the way, the ones who sponsor these things are all about, using garbage cows to make garbage milk. They're not from local farmers. They're the big industrial farms that are doing that. So you have to distinguish, right? The best thing always, and we can't do it today, Alan, but is to buy local if you can. Buy as much local as you can so things aren't shipped across the world where they lose most of their nutritional value, and eat in season as much as you can. Now, obviously, you can't always do that, but it's even better to eat frozen vegetables than to have
yeah,
vegetables that were sitting there for, coming from Argentina and just sitting there forever. So
yeah,
there
but
again, that's common sense. And this guy in the freaking Uber knew that. Not because he took a single course, but because it made sense. And this is
and it
what
was the
people
way he
do.
was raised in the
That's how
country he
he was
came from.
raised.
So
Exactly.
you also though a little bit about being careful about where you're raised and eating local. So Long Island, which is where I live. I work in the city, but I live on Long Island. Unfortunately, had major military plants there, and the island was either military plants or potato farms. And unfortunately, the potato farms used tons of pesticides,
Yeah.
and the military dumped these forever chemicals into the ground. So you can't eat local on
You're
Long
right. You're
Island,
right. You got to have a caveat.
nor drink the water. So I'll just
Yes.
add that in. But you're right. Most parts of the world are safe and healthy.
Yes.
Upstate New York, which doesn't have this, like that's where we try and get a lot of our products from, like the farms and stuff out there.
Yeah.
But
That's
you know,
local. That's
yeah,
considered local in the in
yeah,
this day and age.
yeah.
Local is even
Unfortunately, Long Island is a toxic waste dump.
well, even California can be local because it gets here immediately. So,
Yeah.
you don't anywhere in the United States is kind of local. And you bring the point up that you it's not good enough. Like you could have organic rice. Rice is a good example. Where they grow a lot of rice, they used to have cotton. And cotton, the main way to fertilize cotton was with arsenic. And so arsenic is in the ground. And now they're growing rice in that, and the rice has a lot of arsenic in it. Even if
Arsenic's not
it's
good for you, Andy?
it might, here's the funny thing. I don't know. It might be. No one's looked at it. But it's just the idea. You could buy organic rice, but that doesn't mean it's still healthy because it's still growing whatever was there before. You have to know what was in the ground. In Baltimore, it was a bunch of, a bunch of steel factories, and it's just the ground is poison in Baltimore. So you really can't grow anything in the city. So you have to know. You have to. Yeah, it's exactly right. But these are little things that you could figure out, and they're super important. Um, but knowing the problem, Alan, and a lot of people bring this up, is that people say, "Well, where do I get any nutrition advice?" That first of all, I work with a lot of good nutritionists who also would have failed the boards for
Hmm.
lifestyle medicine. One of them said to me, "What are they from the 1980s?" He said, "Have they read not a single study since the 1980s?" I said, "They are. It's written. It was set up by a guy who writes a book, How Not to Die. I think his name is Gigler, and the guy makes some good points, but he's dogmatic. You have to do exactly what he says, or you're wrong, and that's how he set up this
Yeah.
course.
I mean,
But yeah,
yeah, I mean, my advice to many people, and unfortunately, I am writing a lot of the GLPs for weight loss, because you're pushed to it.
well,
But
you're pushed. I do too. I'm pushed.
but again, it's about common sense. A lot of fresh fruits and vegetables. People go on these diets and like they go on a no carb diet and they don't eat fruits. They don't eat some vegetables. They don't eat meat. They don't eat fish. The more diversified the diet is, the less likely you're going to be able to get some side effect from whatever toxin it is that they have. So I tell people, diversify your diet. If you love something and it's really bad for you, don't eat it more than once a month or something like that. But don't deprive yourself because psychologically you're going to be angry about it. Like for me, it's two things. People might get sick. Everybody might not know what White Castle is. White Castle is my birthday dinner every year.
Yeah.
Okay. It's horrible for you. They put it on that grill and it's probably dog meat. I'm sorry for the dog lovers. I'm a dog lover. Here's my doggies here. I love my little girls. But like, so once a year I eat it. It
It's
just
a
does it for
treat.
me.
It's a
And,
treat.
and maybe like 3 times a year I'll have a hot dog because like I
Yeah.
love hot dogs with mustard and sauerkraut. And it's the same with a bagel. I mean, bagels are really bad. Like have it every few months.
Yeah.
But I crack up when a diabetic comes in and they have a bagel for breakfast every day. And that's not so unhealthy, right? I was like, no, it's like 17 slices of bread in that bagel. It's like
That's what
it weighs a pound.
I always ask, what's better breakfast? A bowl of oatmeal and eggs, or a toast with jelly and orange juice. Because toast with jelly and orange juice, you're basically just having sugar. That's the whole thing.
Yeah,
But some people think that's healthy, so they always pick that one because the eggs are on my other one, and people have been taught that eggs are so evil. So
I eat eggs. I don't eat a ton of them, but I eat it a couple times a week,
I
you
eat
know.
pasture-raised eggs. I eat it. I eat probably two a day of pasture-raised eggs, and I feel better, doing that.
Yeah.
But there's this one great book, and I took this guy's course too, and I can't pronounce the guy, so I'm not going to bother. But it's called Fiber Fueled, and the guy is a vegetarian because he says he's got a meat addiction. He used to live in Chicago. He ate meat all the time. And so most of the book is vegetarian, but he acknowledges that if you have good meat, good eggs, good, good fish, that's fine. But his whole concept in the book, and I encourage anyone to get this because it's really common sense, is diversity. He says every
Exactly.
day you need to have so many different colors, so many different fruits and vegetables. He uses chia seeds, flax seeds, throwing all this stuff. He said they all feed different parts of the gut microbiome. That they're all crucial. You cannot stick with just a couple things and just say that now I'm healthy. Has to be different every day.
A
And that's the
hundred
whole
percent.
key.
It's about common sense. It is about diversity. The colors I like, but when you're talking to kids, you need to tell the kids not the colors like, the pink marshmallow things
Yeah,
like
that's
that. That
true.
that
All
doesn't
my
count.
marshmallows are all different.
Yeah.
My M&Ms, just the M&Ms alone, I got my colors right.
That's right. See, you got to say, eat diversified things, eat organic, real organic, natural things, eat whole foods, keep away from processed foods, and you will be okay.
Right. And the other stuff is kind of like in the just tossed in. Well, what about meat? That's up to you. But if you're going to eat meat, eat good meat.
Right,
And don't
exactly.
don't eat as much, because honestly, the grass-fed beef, they say, well, it's like twice as expensive. And I say, eat half as much. I said that then we're in good shape. We're
Yeah.
even.
Have it twice a month.
Have it twice a month. And
This
my
was
my
great, I think.
my big thing that I eat when I'm in New York is a Reuben, which
Okay.
similarly is not great, but it's got the sauerkraut. So fermented foods are also great for you. And you New Yorkers, and I'm a New Yorker.
Uh,
There's a place called the Pickle Guy
oh
in
yeah.
Manhattan. They
Yeah.
ferment everything. They ferment mangoes. You name it, it's ferment, and it's
Well,
all really good and good for you too.
so another one of my poisons, and I have it about once a year, is a pastrami sandwich from Katz's Deli.
Yeah,
Like
I love it.
you can't beat it.
You can't feed it. It's the whole experience. It's
Exactly.
great. Yeah. So yeah, I think
Common
honestly,
sense.
you do not have to go to a nutritionist. You can, but you have to pick the right one, because they could be dogmatic too. So you don't want to go to a place where they say this is exactly how you have to eat. You have to have a sense of eating. Use the common sense. Cheating is fine. Just you're not going to do it all the time. In fact, a lot of studies on nutrition presume that you're only going to be compliant 80% of the time. That's about the rule of thumb that most people can handle. You don't have to be, doesn't have to be your religion, to do this, but it is what's going to keep you healthy. It's not going to the
Absolutely.
doctor. It's not getting all the pills. It's what's going to keep you healthy. So we'll talk about next time what's not keeping you healthy, which are a lot of scam doctors who are on TV,
Making a lot of money.
making a lot of money. So that's what we'll talk about next time. So have a
Sounds
good
good.
have a good time in the snow.
Don't forget, guys, the return to healing. We talk about all of this in there and a lot about common sense of what is wrong with our messed up healthcare
And
system
we and we
and how to fix
document
it.
it. We document it so you could say, yeah, this is all documented. So
Take
okay,
care.
take care, Alan.
Bye bye.